Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I just gave my rankings on the 1 through 8 of best head coaching hires in the NFL from this coaching carousel cycle. Now we are going to be moving on to a team that is sort of semi-adjacent to this coaching hire, as they just lost their defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, and the Dallas Cowboys, who have made a little bit of noise this week as their owner, Jerry Jones, has been present at the upcoming Senior Bowl that is set to take place on Saturday. He goes there most years, and he was speaking to the media, and he gave a handful of interesting quotes on his team's position going into next season. He talked about how he and the organization were all in for the upcoming season. He gave a quote. This is pulled from CBS Sports. He said, "I would anticipate with looking ahead at our key contracts that we'd like to address, we will be all in. I would anticipate we will be all in at the end of this year. We will push the hell out of it. It will be going all in on different people that you've done in the past. We will be going all in. We've seen some things out of some of the players that we want to be all in on. Yes, I would say that you will see us this coming year, not build for the future." Now, if you couldn't hear, it was a lot of all in talk. Gave the term exactly 5 different times in that little speech there. And he was talking about how they've sort of been within this realm of contending, but haven't been able to capitalize just yet. And this quote is a little bit interesting, just given the fact that last year he was asked about the Rams and the Eagles making the Super Bowl, and he said that he wanted to look a little bit longer term for the organization and not want to jeopardize betting everything all for 1 year and then having to struggle with sort of some of the struggles. I know that the Rams have turned it around, but at the time that he gave this quote as well, the Rams had just come off of a 5-12 season. Things looked a little bleak there. Obviously, revisionist history. They and their front office deserve a lot of credit for the way that they were able to turn this around with really good drafting and really good coaching. But the idea still was there that you're sacrificing a lot for this 1 year, but they were able to do it. And now he's talking about not being worried about the future and that he does want this immediate success this year, which is just a little bit of a change of philosophy. And it's one that obviously when you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, expectations are always pretty much winning the Super Bowl. Not that that's been the reality, but they want to be contenders year in and year out, and that hasn't been really the case up to this point. Now, they have at least won 12 or more games in each of the last 3 seasons under Mike McCarthy, so that's sort of where Jerry Jones is talking about. He kept using this analogy, hanging around the rim. They are in the vicinity of being there. They even won a playoff game last year, but they have not been able to actually string together these wins. The drought without a championship game appearances stretching longer and longer with each year. And I think that really when you talk about this idea of what does it mean for the Cowboys to be all in, I think that we should be expecting a little bit of a different mindset and sort of some of the logistics of how they go about this upcoming offseason. They have a handful of moves that are sort of in their hands on the table. It starts with their key pieces that are coming up on expiring deals. That would be Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. Now they're under contract for next year, But then going forward, it's a matter of, do you extend them now? Do you wait out their contracts? Now, Jerry Jones has not been, he is not committed to signing Dak Prescott to a long-term extension yet. He still, at the Senior Bowl as well, has bestowed that he does still have faith in Dak Prescott and thinks that he can be the one to help lead them to a Super Bowl. Now, at the same time, he was also giving quotes that what's the word I'm looking for? The sentiment that the Cowboys will only go as far as Dak Prescott leads them. They win with Dak, they lose with Dak. So we put a lot on Dak's shoulders, which, to be fair, is a lot of the reality when you talk about NFL quarterbacks and having these talented rosters. A lot of the time it does come down to their quarterback. So I didn't think that the comments were unfair. I just thought it was interesting quite how much he sort of harped on that idea. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting decision to see how they work this out, because if they give contract extensions to these guys, they can try and defer some of the money a couple years later so that in this 1-2 year span, they can maximize their salary and they can load up with the most talented roster possible to get themselves towards contention. Because I do feel like, to a certain level, the NFC is pretty open right now, and the NFL as a whole is pretty open. We will obviously see. I mean, I say that, but it is the Chiefs and the Niners, two of the teams that have sort of been running the NFL the past handful of years. They are the ones back in the Super Bowl, but I don't think that it's quite that simple, because the Chiefs we had concerns with all year, and now, yes, they are back in the Super Bowl and everything looks great for them, but they have a handful of key free agents coming up. They have Chris Jones, I believe. I know there was the contract holdout at the beginning of the year, so I may be wrong. I have to look more into the details on that specifically, but Chris Jones may be available this offseason. L'Jarius Sneed, who has been an unbelievable cornerback for them, he hits free agency this year. The Niners are going to have to make a bunch of moves because of they are in the bottom half of salary cap teams. They're going to have to make a decision on what to do with Brock Purdy, because right now he's currently making dirt cheap for a quarterback, and he just led his team to the Super Bowl. He is likely to get a payday himself, and they'll have to sort of cut down on the edges elsewhere on their roster. So all this to be said, I think that the NFL is very much open right now, and I think that parity, again, despite having the same Super Bowl matchup that we just had a couple years ago, I think that it's very gettable, and I think that the path, if it wasn't this year for the Cowboys, what are they going to do to sort of retool and build themselves up even stronger to make more of a competitive run at this thing? They don't have too many extremely significant free agents. They have their center, Tyler Biadasz. He was a staple for them, and the offensive line in Dallas, I know they're not quite maybe what they were in the late 2010s when that was their full identity, but still a good group, still an important piece of their identity. Also on that note, Tyron Smith, their longtime tackle, is coming up on free agency. And then some defensive players, Stephon Gilmore, Jaron Kearse, Dorrance Armstrong. I think Dorrance Armstrong is one of the actually more underrated players in the NFL. And then Tony Pollard as well, who I know he had a very disappointing season this year, his first time being the number one running back in that backfield in Dallas. I am curious how they plan to address that situation. There will be some free agents. Do they go to the draft? But sort of on that note as well, talking about the draft, I think that if he is talking about all in and pushing all the chips into this season, Does that mean that they are potentially going to look to try and send off some of these draft picks to get high caliber players? Like last year, they traded a late round pick for Stephon Gilmore, who had a very solid season for them on the defensive end, former defensive player of the year, had sort of been middling over the past couple of years since his departure from New England, but showed flashes, and he showed flashes this year as well. I don't think that he's going to be back in Dallas on anywhere near the same contract that he had this previous season, was making a lot of money. I don't think he's going to be able to cash out the same way, but this just to be said that they were willing to sort of give up some of this lower end draft capital. Could we see them move on from a day 1 pick, a day 2 pick for them? Because I'm not sure if at this point, with the pressure that is surrounding really their two cornerstones in a sense between Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott, how much do you want to sort of bank your futures on these unproven rookies? And again, we've seen how much impact rookies can have in the NFL. If you look at the Rams, I mean, I think that Puka Nacua was really the catalyst to, obviously it was Matt Stafford coming back from his injury, but it was finding a gem like that. It was finding a Byron Young in the 3rd round and getting these cheap contracts to also make up for your heavy spending in other areas. And I just think that it's going to be very interesting to see how the Cowboys, in their new self-called all-in mentality, are going to try and weigh the balance of not giving up your entire future, but as Jerry Jones put it, not concerning yourself too much with the future and focusing on what can we do that will make us the best possible team today. Because I think that between all these players that I just mentioned that are going to be due for getting their money soon, as in Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, they have cornerstones at 3 of the most important positions in the league. I think that they have the offensive line that's been great. If they get Biotish back for their center, they have Tyler Smith as well, their rookie. He's also been very effective. Running back, you probably let Pollard go, but I'm sort of the belief that as long as you have a good offensive line in place, which the Cowboys do, you can sort of make that running game effective. And I know it's probably easier said than done, and the Cowboys fans would likely be the first to tell me that, because this season was so underwhelming, but as far as the run game specifically goes. But I think that you have the pieces in place at all of the cornerstone positions, including your head coach. I know that Mike McCarthy, a lot of people aren't high on him. I think that he's fine. It's a pretty simple argument for him either way. There's no denying that he has a lot of success during the regular season. There's also no denying that, given the rosters he's had over the years, probably should have one more. And this is dating back to his tenure with the Packers, where yes, they win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, but given how much talent those Packers teams had, and I know that defenses weren't always the best in those Green Bay groups, the fact that they only got one Super Bowl appearance out of that as a whole is pretty disappointing. And you can sort of spread the blame any way you want. I think that it is an indictment against Mike McCarthy that he hasn't won more, but just like that, you also do have to give him credit for what Jerry Jones was talking about, is he keeps you in the vicinity of being able to make that push. Now, Jerry Jones and his son Stephen Jones, they're going to have to sort of take that level and roster-wise construct a group of guys that can take that next step. And I'm very fascinated to see how Jerry Jones manages this all in. And I don't want to get too caught up in the all in term, but I read the quote. He said it 5 times. He means all in one way or another. It's just a matter of what that looks like. And I think that we may see some crazy moves from the Cowboys that we haven't seen in the past if they truly are no longer worried about the future and they want to push their chips in for this year. So a lot still to be seen with that, and it's going to have to be something that we monitor going forward. But we are going to be taking another break. On the other side, we are going to be getting into some NBA because last night we had a couple homecomings for 2 future Hall of Famers in Kevin Durant and Damian Lillard. So we'll go over how those games went and what some of the bigger picture stuff means with both of those situations. So stick with us. We will be right back.